Thanks so much, and thank all of you for joining us today. We have featured David Lipscomb before. He is the person in charge of the federal report card at the Center for Plain Language, and he's spoken to us before. I know that he'll give us some really good updates, and when you have questions, what we're going to do is to go through his presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions. Please put your questions in the chat because that's how we manage it. And here you go, David Lipscomb.
All right, thank you, Catherine. It's always a delight to speak to Plain. So thank you for inviting me. And Happy New Year to everybody. It's a weird time to be in Washington, D.C., but let's cast our minds back to October 2020. That's when we released the federal report card, the 2020 federal report card. What I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to talk very briefly, just in case there's anybody on the line who's not completely familiar with the report card, and review some of the conclusions from this past year, and then want to really dive into some, ideally, a good discussion of where we want to go from here, as well as any questions you have about this past year and what you can and do, what your teams can do to improve your scores. So let's get into it. I think everyone on the line probably knows that the federal report card is run by the Center for Plain Language, as Katherine mentioned. And it's our way of evaluating how well people are doing applying the 2010 Plain Writing Act. And this is year number 10. A decade of the Plain Writing Act. We've got a new administration coming in. So it is a time to look back not only at the last year, but look back at the 10 years, that first decade, and to think about how we want to do this for the next decade as well. So with that kind of big picture in mind, let's take a look at a little bit more. I think most of you know this, but for those of you who don't, the federal plain language report card divided into two grades. You always have two grades. One, an organizational compliance grade. That really is to see, just the check marks to see, do we have the plain language officers in place? Are they responsive to emails? The reporting on the required plain language website, and do you have the yearly annual reports? In those annual reports, do you have the training discussed? Do you cover, what exactly your agency has been doing regarding training? So that's the organizational compliance. Writing grade, we, as you know, usually grade 2 pages every year, and a little more detail on that. This past year, we graded first the urgent help page that we had graded in 2019. So we regraded one of your pages from the previous year. This is ideal for us because, and I hope for you, because it really gives everyone a chance to improve, to take into account the excellent feedback that you all get from judges, and to see how well your team can revise based on those good comments. And each year we grade something new, so there's overlap. Now this past year, we graded each agency's coronavirus page, something that every agency launched last year. We are going to regrade that page this coming year, and we will grade a new page. That's yet to be determined, and so would love input on that as well. So how did we do overall? Well, for the organizational compliance, about half of the agencies got A-level grades on organizational compliance. So a good 50% more are doing really, really well as far as staffing, training, reporting, all of the basics of this. Unfortunately, about a third failed. And that is primarily because, I think we had a lot of turnover in the last couple of years. And some agencies, amid all of the things that have gone on in the last couple of years, have just stopped completing the required reporting. And it's something that we have to restart. And I think that's that's definitely something that we want to give a little bit of attention to. I do. I want to make sure that this 1/3 of the group that we're grading, which is about 21, 22 agencies each year, that we get those teams back on track. As far as the writing, we had some really good improvement in the urgent help pages. So overall, the urgent help pages, that was great to see. We had some wonderful things. Not only did the VA continue to do well, the Interior Department had this incredibly wonderful rewrite of water purification page, which was terrific. As far as the coronavirus pages go, not so great. Overall, the pages, and it was a weird year. And these pages had to come up very quickly. We understand that. But overall, they were far too focused on the agencies themselves. Really not, some of them were pretty much PR pages to just kind of like tout what the agency has done instead of really focusing on the audience and what the audience's needs are on the public. And the information, a lot of the things that we seem to have been doing really well the last 10 years didn't really apply that well to the coronavirus pages. Some of the pages were just lists of links, in just almost random order, very hard to find. Headings were just, category headings that just didn't really supply much information. Very difficult to navigate for the most part. We can take a look at one exemplary page. And this one is from CFPB, and I chose CFPB. HHS also obviously did a great job, but I chose to look at CFPB as a kind of exemplary page because, frankly, they are an example of how you can do well with, on the coronavirus page when you're not a health-oriented agency. The CFPB obviously focusing on consumer financial protection. And one of the things right from the start of this, you can see they focus on the consumer, the agency's name, besides up at the top, it's not all about CFPB, it's actually about the consumer and the public. You featured 19 times on the page. The headings are really, addressed directly. They're speaking directly to the audience about, how CFPB can be helpful in terms of, how CFPB can be helpful in terms of getting through the pandemic. And the sections were short, tight, no long lists. You had bump, 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 and easy to navigate, easy to go through, really terrific. The verbs, it was very verb driven, pay your mortgage. We had imperative mood and some beautiful, just bam, 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 here's what you do. Links told people what they could find. And then the videos that were there supported the text. And this is also true of the pictures on the page. They were helpful. On other pages, on some of the pages, you had these enormous photos or enormous videos that just took up all of this real estate and were not really that focused on the consumer itself. Here's an example of an agency that could improve. This is Commerce Department. And you can see it's almost the mirror image of, or opposite here. The agency name appears 15 times, whereas, obviously the consumer doesn't really appear. This is not written directly addressing the reader, directly addressing the audience. It is all about the agency, and the agency is the star of the page. The headings are abstract, and they're, Commerce Cares Act implementation plan, a noun string, the kind of jargon, whole of government approach. I know that this is something that was discussed last year, but it is jargon, and it just was everywhere in these coronavirus pages. Vague verbs, implement, facilitate, instead of the kind of pay that you have in the CFPB pages. And then, here's an example of just, a long list of links filled with acronyms. And this one, this kept on going for, I think, 20 more links. So it was a long one. What we did, obviously, we went through these, we graded them, and most importantly, more important, I think, than the grades are the comments that our judges wrote, which I hope everyone has received at this point. So the next point here is to think about how we're going to revise these in the coming year. Obviously, coronavirus, we're in a new vaccine stage. It's exciting in that sense, but we are also obviously going to be dealing with the coronavirus, dealing with a pandemic environment through the rest of the fiscal year. And so that when we come about to grade once again the federal report card, we will be looking at the coronavirus pages once again. So I think that we can make a lot of progress on these. Would love to celebrate. I mean, I have zero interest in dinging people with the federal report card. Really, more and more just, at this point, especially after 10 years, let's just really try to celebrate what we're doing in terms of plain language. That is the end of my presentation. I think everybody knows that on the site, here, let me stop sharing, or can I actually? Am I able to do that? Actually, I can go to my site, our site. On the site of, if we just go to the Center for Plain Language, right from here, centerforplainlanguage.org, and you just click on the report card. From the report card, you can see, this will give you the actual one pager, the one-page report card, give everybody's grades. But not only will you see the key findings, what we graded, how we graded, who did the grading, and then again, you can download the report card itself. And obviously, I'm also around. If you ever just have a quick question, you can always ask me. But with that, I know that was a fairly quick, we're only 15 minutes into this, but I'm kind of done in terms of what I wanted to give as a brief overview. And I'm happy to discuss in more detail. Do we have any questions coming in?
Hi, David. So far, none yet.
Okay.
Um,
Well, well, let's one of the things I do want to make sure everybody does have in terms of the how we graded. Let me just click on that piece real quick. Just so in case anybody has any questions about, the compliance grade, the organizational compliance grade, and the writing evaluation, how that works. These are the grading criteria. And so these are here as well. So any questions on there, again, you can come back and see what we graded from each agency as well as who did the grading as well. All right.
so, David,
So go ahead.
sorry, not to interrupt. We have a few questions coming in.
Sure.
Warren Sloop asked, what is the biggest mark that is consistently missed with the agency's language?
Well, consistently, that's a great question. I mean, I'm not sure there's one that the most common, especially this last year, was this focus on the agency. And then the second thing would be what you would call nominalizations. These are verbs that are turned into nouns, like implementation, or instead of taking a vague verb like implement and then even turning it into a more, even something that's even more vague, like such as implementation. So this kind of language is really pretty typical that we see quite a bit. Again, I mentioned it's a kind of noun string, but it's also full of abstract language. Plain language, is language that is going to get your reader to immediately understand it and be able to respond to it. Because we're talking about human beings, that means we want to speak in the most concrete language we can. And by concrete language, we're talking about language that evokes images, language that appeals to the senses. Often especially sight, because we are very visually oriented, but also, things that we can hear, taste, touch, smell, that these are the things that are going to work best with our readers. The language of human beings. So, jargon is a very particular type of abstract language. It's a kind of insiderism abstract language, shortcut language, but it still falls into that larger category of not concrete. I mean, not something that is going to evoke images, because that's what we want. We want our readers to immediately get it by, I see it. That was a long answer.
Thank you, David. Very cool. Katina Stapleton said that she noticed there are 2 organizations marked as most improved for last report card. What contributed to the improved rankings in these examples?
Well, in both cases, this is the State Department's passport application status page. They did a reorganization in both cases, and the Interior's 2 ways to purify water when you're stuck out in the middle of a national park. And in both cases, they reorganized and to really address readers' top concerns. The passport application status page was much cleaner, and they simplified the language. So it was just, making, that so that the reader could immediately find the information on the page because of the new organization. The headings were clear. Each section was brief. There weren't, it wasn't just a cascade of links and other things. So sorry, I thought I had turned that off. Apologies. So serious apologies about that. I thought I'd got that turned off. Anyway, so yes, so in both cases, they were just, it just made it so much easier for the reader to find, understand, and then use the page. And especially, in both of these cases, they're really important. In these urgent help pages, the use, how quickly can someone get a sense of, where's my passport? Okay, I've got to leave in, to go to someplace. Obviously, most of us aren't doing that these days, but in 2 weeks, and I need to know what's happened to my passport and where it is. It was just, did a terrific job of really rethinking that page through the reader, and then with the Interior Department's, the National Park Service, 2 ways to purify water. I mean, that was just a lovely job. Really, they had reorganizing the page around, how to, instead of just kind of a list of things, it was really just smartly done in kind of guiding the reader, and assuming that the reader is probably just going to have something like this, which just went off. That's the best thing you're going to have out in a national park, and you need to figure out what do I do? How can I actually get water? And they did it in a beautifully simplified, elegant way in both cases. Language was simple. The organization was elegant and easy to, just made everything easy to find and understand and use. That was, again, a long answer.
Thanks, David. There are a couple of questions that came in regarding training sessions on plain language, which I can answer that yes, we offer a few workshops a year. I would encourage everyone to go on Digital.gov events page and check out when those are. We don't have any planned for 2021 yet. But Katherine and Katina, our co-leads, will always promote those trainings and workshops to the community, to the plain language community of practice, when we get those on the books. Michelle is wondering if operating divisions within each agency also, are they also graded as well?
It's a great question. And a question that we get every year. Currently, we can only grade, the department level agencies, and and yes, we grade pages often within. So, for instance, I just mentioned the Interior Department. We ended up grading a page that was actually from the National Park Service for the urgent help page. But we're limited. We're limited in staff, so we, each department level agency, the 15 cabinet level agencies plus 7 others, that's what we grade. And in some beautiful future where we have an endless number of volunteers and I have more bandwidth to train lots of judges and organize lots of judges, then we could offer more feedback to people at the this more sub-agency level kind of feedback. I think, Michelle, that's what you were getting at, yes?
Excellent. Karen is wondering, what are the data points and kind of analytics you look for, you look at when grading the pages, if any?
What is there a way, Gabby, is there a way to get more from Karen in terms of what she means? I mean, we have criteria. I mean, and you know, we don't have any formulas. So for instance, we're not using readability formulas or anything like that. We have 6 different categories that we go through, you know, understanding of audience needs, style, structure, information design, navigation, the kind of use of multimedia, and the degree to which that, you know, is you know, worked with everything else, and then the overall grade. So, and we have, you know, we use something called submissible. I think a lot of you probably have, or submittable. It's not submittable, which enables us, you know, to work. We've got obviously, you know, a lot of judges, and you know, each page gets graded by 3 different judges, and we average the grade for each page. And you know, but as far as metrics or analytics, you know, in terms of page views or effect, that's not part of our scope.
Although, David, if I can interrupt,
Sure.
there was a point where one of the pages you judged,
right,
was most visited page.
Yeah, well, that's true.
As long as it wasn't the home page, and
right.
there are very good reasons for that. So sometimes analytics plays a part in.
Yeah, well, it plays a part in terms of what we choose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're in every case, you know, we want to choose high profile pages that, you know, matter to the general public. I mean, we're not analyzing pages that, you know, are never seen. I mean, these are all pages that pop up, and are highly rated. And as Katherine mentioned a few years ago, for 2 years in a row, we graded each agency's most visited page. You know, and so this year, obviously, coronavirus was top of everyone's mind, and that was, you know, something that was obviously high profile. What exactly we're going to choose for this coming year, I'm not sure yet, and I'd love input on that.
Excellent. You had mentioned the judges. Marcy is asking, do you ever ask members of the public for their input on these pages?
That's a great question. You know, we haven't. I mean, you know, it's a great question, Marcy, and I think it's a brilliant question. I'm just not sure of how to do that in a way that could make it happen. I love the thinking. I love the idea. And given that we are, you know, plain language is all about the reader. I mean, it's plain language is, you know, writing is documents that put the reader first. And so getting the reader's input and evaluation on this, you would think that would be a good way to go about this. So it's just how to do that, and how to do that in a systematized way across agencies in a way that's comparable, that's, you know, and doable with volunteer staff. Just haven't figured that out yet. It's a great question though. If she has an idea, Marcy, if you have any ideas, I mean, start firing away.
Excellent. Thanks, David. This might be a question for you, Katherine, and or Katina, but Michael's asking, so the federal plain language guidelines seem to have last been revised in May of 2011. He's asking if there are any plans to update or refresh these guidelines, if there is a need for any specific changes, and or are there opportunities for agencies to suggest any changes?
Well, I can take that. The guidelines are being revised as we speak. We will next have the job of getting them up, and we, you can always suggest changes at, I think it's information@plainlanguage.gov or possibly info@plainlanguage.gov. One of the things, though, is guidelines are not going to be agency specific, so I mean, we look for, will this benefit other people, other agencies? And David, you might also want to address who's included in the report card. It's executive level.
Yeah.
I will also say that when I say it's only executive level, it's not Congress. Everybody always laughs. So.
Right. So, yeah, well, most of the agencies in the federal government are executive branch, and I mean, there aren't really that many congressional branch agencies. I mean, that are specifically linked there, but yes, they're all executive branch, and we limited it currently to the 15 cabinet level agencies, department level, plus 7 kind of obvious ones like Social Security Administration. But Katherine, that's great to hear, and I'd actually love to, not now, but at some point, love to learn more actually about the revisions myself, and because we're, obviously whatever you do, we need to be coordinating that so that the report card reflects exactly the expectations that are spelled out within the guidelines themselves. So that's great. It's great to hear. Exciting.
Excellent. Thanks, Katherine. Thanks, David. Warren Sloop is, for the Plain Language Summit, another plain language friendly Joe Kimball suggested that lawyers are the main source of opposition to plain language practices. So the question is, can you elaborate on what is holding these failing agencies back?
I think there are the agencies that are not doing well in terms of basic compliance, organizational compliance. I mean, those who haven't published an annual plain language report since 2015 or 2016. I mean, a lot of that is just like the initial advocates who were there, from 2010 to 2016 left. And, I mean, that in the kind of specific things that we're talking about, I think a lot of it is staff and staff turnover. And so we've got, what's happened in the last 10 years is you've got some agencies that are doing incredibly well, and have amazing training, USDA, there are lots of agencies that are doing really, really well. And, have a culture that embraces plain language. But then you have other agencies, at least to the department level, where it's not true. And you do, and then you have some agencies or departments where some of the sub-agencies have embraced plain language even more than the department level. So, I mean, I think right now we have an opportunity with the change in administration to kind of reinvigorate our commitment to plain language and to restart or cultivate plain language within some of the departments that haven't done that much in the last couple of years. Is that a politic enough answer?
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Kim, I am not sure which agency you are referring to, but maybe this can be more of a general for you, David. Kim's asking if could our agency have a review of certain pages and or sections?
Gosh, I'd love to do that, Kim. It's staff and time, and we all have day jobs, and I would love to. I mean, I'd love to figure out a way to do that. So you can write to me and maybe we can figure out a way to do it. DCL@georgetown.edu, DCL@georgetown.edu. And we can brainstorm. It's just hard. It's just resources.
And to follow on, I saw in the chat someone asking when the guidelines were going to be posted, and it's, as I always say to things like that, my cloning efforts continue. We'll post the guidelines when we get them ready and onto the site. So.
Thanks, Katherine.
Sure.
Joe has a question, and I'm assuming this kind of is a follow-up to Michelle's original question about the analytics. Mm-hmm. Joe's question is just curious, why not include readability formulas and scores? I rely on them often.
It's a great question. The readability scores, and again, I'm going to have to be delicate in the way I answer this. I think readability scores can give you a great shortcut, and there are a lot of quantitative approaches that can give you, a great shortcut on things. But sentence length, and word length, syllables, things like that. The kinds of things that go into readability scores that are quantifiable, that go into a kind of formula like that, they are often helpful in their initial signs, but we don't use them because they too often have become replacements for really looking at a reader, the kinds of things that are really important to readers, which you're looking at right now. Findability on a page, Flesch and Rudolf Flesch, he first came up with these formulas, and initially, interestingly enough, the formula not only included what you have today as the readability formula, the kind of reading ease formula, but also included personal pronouns. Are you directly addressing the reader and things like that? And then in late 40s, it kind of split into some things, and some of the good stuff got lost. And it sounds like, Flesch kind of regretted that as well. Anyway, I could give a very long answer to this, but I think that as long as readability scores don't replace the kind of real measures which are, have to be about the reader and really trying to think in terms of the reader, they're just not at this point easily quantifiable, easily systematized. Not to say that they won't be, but currently I haven't seen any readability formulas that I want to use.
If I can add on to that, just I feel like every time I say this, I'm doing evil so that good may come, which we know is not going to work. But for people who like readability formulas, the sheer number, you know, your content came in at 38.5, that sheer fact of the number can often get people to accept edits on their content where they might not if you just said your content needs to be plainer. Sometimes the 38.5 is convincing.
Yeah. No, and I perhaps is a little extreme on that. I just, in terms of our grading, let me just answer it in terms of, I am not against readability formulas, you know, across the board. I think they can be useful. I just, we haven't found a good way to incorporate them into our grading system. Let's put it that way.
Thanks, David. And Joe Siddall just made a good comment here that, you know, while scores can aid, but not replace the human factor for interpretation and readability. So just echo.
No, that's nicely put, Joe.
Are there any other questions out there for David or Katherine? Or it looks like, you know, we've been able to tackle most in the chat, but feel free to chime in now. Or David, is there anything?
Well, can I ask the group a question that maybe we can answer in the chat? And that is, and I'm going to leave it open. I'll state this in a broad, you know, form. What changes would you like to see to the federal report card in the coming years?
While folks are pondering that question that David just posed, Katie has, you know, said she agrees there's a tool helpful maybe when working with data, again referencing to the to readability hungry authors, but need to be used by professionals who do their own review, and they can really be problematic. So just another comment there. Kim is asking, are previous year's report cards available? And if so, where are these
Absolutely.
report cards?
Just if you go on, you know, up here, and you know, here's the 2020 report card, but if you, I'm sorry, here, so I can see it. So if you you go up here, I don't know why this is what is this? Here we go. Federal report cards. You click on that. Wait, why is that not taking me where I want it to go? Looks like we just rearranged this. I know they are here somewhere. Here we go. Report cards 2012 to 2019. So here they are. So you can get all the older report cards, 2019, and then obviously 2020 gets added to this. Okay, so all the old reports are available on the website, the Center for Plain Language.
Thanks, David. So Marcy and Melanie, echoing this sentiment, Marcy said it would be really helpful to see an analysis at the agency level. Maybe a concerted effort could be made to bulk up on volunteers / assess what would be needed in terms of numbers for volunteers. A huge undertaking, she knows, and maybe this is more of a Katherine question, but they're
well, excuse me, one thing we do is we've asked people, we've asked the list if they want to volunteer for the grading. But you can also go to the Center for Plain Language, because they're the ones who do the grading, and sign up as a volunteer.
Right, right. Well, I think that is another way to do this. I mean, maybe instead of just keeping things all centered within the center, that maybe one of our jobs should be in the next year that we start thinking about how we can train more judges within agencies and kind of foster a culture within individual agencies of doing these kinds of evaluations. I mean, I think that is how I could see things happening, and that the center could help foster that kind of culture, and continue with obviously the annual federal report card, but maybe that's something that we could take on, and could work more closely with the plain language leads within particular agencies. But that currently within agencies, you get tapped to be the plain language officer. It's not exactly like your pay goes up, right?
Right.
So we obviously don't want to make that job onerous in any way either. So, but it's a great question. It's a really tough nut to crack. I think some more brainstorming. I think we can get creative about it. And, it's a kind of cultural shift that, but if we can make this kind of evaluation more decentralized, I think that is the smartest way to go.
excellent. Thanks, David.
Love to hear more on that though, too.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of interest here in the chat about data progression on agencies through multiple years, sub agencies being all over the map, and if there would be a way to maybe look at that over time, a year over year type thing. Lena does have a question, and again, I'm not sure if this is more of a David question or a Katherine question. Lena's, I'm not sure if this was addressed, but can you please provide insight on how to address pushback from OGC, Office of Government-Wide Policy, OGC on plain language changes? This is something we consistently deal with.
This is Katherine answering that. I have found one of the things that I think is key with plain language is always saying your audience, not what you want to say, but what does your audience need to know, and what language do they have it in? And not that I'm recommending this, but I've often played stupid, and it wasn't that hard a thing, but to say, what does this mean? What does this mean? What do you mean by that? What is this acronym? You know, until they were probably sticking pins in a voodoo doll of me. But one of the things that I have found a little more useful than that is just to say, look, we know how people read. We do. We have some evidence on how people read. I forwarded to the list a while ago. I can re-forward. There's a Bright talk by Kate Moran about how people read online. And it takes a while, but they eventually get to the plain language, which is short paragraphs, short sentences, active voice, pronouns, none of that jargon, thank you, and fewer acronyms. You know, it's all the plain language guidelines. And, you know, I've also found that saying, look, I want to make sure that people are able to grasp your excellent point, you know, and do what you want them to do rather than say, oh my God, another big honking document. I'll read that later, and later never comes. So you can play it either way. I mean, that's just something I've found useful. Just, I want to make sure that people actually read this.
Mhm.
Great. Thanks so much.
But that does get us back to lawyers and, you know, bridging that gap. So, you know, Joe Kimball to the rescue, I'm sure.
Excellent. And Katina just peppered in that the Department of Education uses that model for their reviews of the effectiveness of interventions, and they train researchers now on the criteria so they can make sure their work meets the standards of that formal review. So very interesting.
Great.
And let's see, Katie is just making a comment on the lawyer comment. Katie's saying, with lawyers, I've found it can help to ask them gently what they found inaccurate about the plain language version of the phrasing, and sometimes understanding what struck them as wrong in parens can help you offer an edit that is more of a compromise.
That's very good. Yeah.
Yeah. But it looks like there's kind of a lull in the questions. This has been a really good conversation. Does anyone have any additional last minute questions for David or Katherine? And David, Katherine, do you have any closing remarks or any news, upcoming stuff that you'd like to share with the attendees?
Well, I'll just reiterate, I think what has been, you know, the main focus of today. I mean, that we've reached the 10-year mark, and it's a good time to evaluate where we are and what we're doing with the federal report card and how we can do better. You know, I'd like to say my, you know, DMs are open, but you can email me, and because I really would love to work, continue the work that the center has done in the last 10 years with the federal government. It's incredibly important, I think we all know, to continue the work of plain language. And I mean, whatever, we want to celebrate things, and we want to celebrate what's going on. If there are other ways that we can do that, celebrate the good work that you all are doing, brainstorm with us, come up with ideas, send me an email. I'm happy to hop on a one-on-one Zoom with you to talk about it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. And that really is very generous offer. Very cool. Looks like we don't have any more questions. We did drop a feedback survey for folks to fill out and tell us how we can make our Digitalgov plain language events better. Any topics folks are looking forward to reviewing and going over in 2021. We've already had some good suggestions in the chat. But yeah, Katherine, David, want to just close out here for us? And again, folks, thanks so much for joining. And David, excellent presentation. Awesome.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you so much, David, for talking about, even though delayed, but a welcome piece about plain language work, and we'll hope for a good 2021 with starting the new decade. And thanks to all you for joining us and having opinions and questions. I'll write up something with some of the links that we've included and send it out to the community of practice. And golly, we've got someone from Australia. That is so exciting. Yay. So yeah, very glad y'all came. We're hoping to do, shoot, I can't quite remember what we're doing in February. I think we're having a presentation on how to train remotely, how to do remote training. Remote plain language training. So that's something to look forward to. I'll be posting that to the list when we get it up. So everyone have a great day and enjoy your extra 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you all.